Welcome, dear listener. Settle into a quiet space. Let your shoulders drop and take a deep breath. Tonight we begin at the beginning, not of human history, nor even of the gods we know by name, but of everything. Before the seas, before the stars, before Olympus itself, there was only a vast emptiness. The Greeks called it chaos. When we hear the word chaos today, we imagine disorder, confusion, noise. But in the imagination of the ancient poets, chaos was something different. It was a gap, a yawning chasm, a void. Not nothing in the sense of absence, but nothing in the sense of space that has not yet been filled. A darkness that could cradle a universe. From this strange, formless beginning, the first presences stirred. They were not yet gods in the form we know them. No thrones, no temples, no thunderbolts. They were forces, raw and vast, the building blocks of existence given name and breath. The first was Gaia, the earth. Solid, broad-bosomed and enduring, she stretched herself as foundation. She was not shaped by anyone else. She came forth on her own, self-born, the eternal mother. All that would later grow, trees, rivers, cities, and even the Olympian gods, would depend on her. To the Greeks, Earth was not inert rock. She was alive, awake, and always present. Then came Tartarus, the pit beneath all pits. He was not simply the underworld. He was deeper than that, the prison beneath the grave, the abyss where light cannot reach. If Gaia was the ground on which we stand, Tartarus was the endless fall below it. Next came Eros, desire. And here the Greeks reveal something profound, that before light, before law, before even time, there was longing. Eros was not yet the playful winged boy we later picture. In the beginning he was pure force, the attraction that draws things together, that makes creation possible. Without desire, nothing joins, nothing continues. Out of chaos also came Nyx, night, robed in shadow, and her partner Erebus, darkness. From their union would later come Ether, the bright upper air, and Hemera, the day. But at first they were veils upon the emptiness, cloaking existence in mystery. Imagine this first world as the Greeks did. Not silence, not light, not a cosmic architect at work, but presence, slowly gathering, like clouds forming from unseen currents. The earth stretching herself out, the abyss yawning beneath, the pull of desire humming between them, night covering all. This was the Greek way of seeing the world as a family, not built, not engineered, but born. Each piece of nature, earth, sky, darkness, longing, personified, alive, with will and story. Let us pause here and reflect. Why begin with chaos? Why start the universe not with order, but with a void? Perhaps because the Greeks understood something we still feel when we close our eyes at night, that existence is fragile, suspended over emptiness, that before form there is always formlessness, before creation there is always the risk of nothing at all. Chaos is not the enemy of life, it is the womb of possibility. Out of nothing, something stirs. Out of emptiness, presence takes shape. As you listen, notice how these first figures are not yet moral. Gaia is not good or evil, she simply is, fertile and steady. Tartarus is not wicked, he is depth itself, waiting. Night is not sinister, but a veil. Even desire is not yet temptation, it is simply the power that keeps the world moving. These are archetypes, not characters, the skeleton beneath the skin of myth. The Greeks were telling us, the world is alive because it is full of forces that can never be fully controlled. Earth can nurture, but also groan. Desire can create, but also destroy. Night can comfort, but also conceal. The stories that follow will give them shape. Fathers, mothers, children, rivalries. But in this first moment, they are raw truth, too large to tame. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. A vast gap, silent but humming. The earth rising green and broad. darkness draped like a cloak, desire glimmering like heat in the air, the abyss yawning endlessly below. This is the beginning, the place from which all myths, all heroes, all tragedies, all songs will emerge. And so, dear listener, we end this first chapter not with a conclusion, but with a threshold. Out of chaos, Gaia will bring forth more. Soon she will call forth Ouranos, the sky, to stretch over her. From their union will come the Titans, the Cyclopes, and the 100-handed ones. And from their conflict will come the first act of violence, the first rebellion, the first prophecy of downfall. But that is the next part of our journey. For now, rest in the quiet of chaos. Feel the space, the possibility, the slow stirring of creation. Let it be a lullaby of beginnings, a reminder that even out of emptiness, life can rise. You are still drifting at the edge of the beginning. Around you stretches chaos, the yawning void. Night hangs like a soft curtain. Desire hums unseen, waiting to bind things together. And now, out of that emptiness, the first true presence stirs, the one who will become the ground of everything to come. Her name is Gaia, the Earth. In Hesiod's Theogony, she appears without parent, without maker. She is self-born, arising from chaos, as if necessity itself had taken shape. Broad-bosomed, the poet says, able to hold all things. She is not a goddess perched on a throne, nor a figure with human form. She is the very earth itself, the soil beneath the feet of mortals, the hills, the valleys, the dark caves, the fertile plains. Every place that can bear life is Gaia's body. The Greeks did not imagine the earth as dead matter. To them, Gaia was alive. When you plowed the soil, you touched her skin. When you dug a well, you pierced her flesh. When earthquakes shook the land, they were her groans, her anger, or perhaps her restless shifting. To honor the earth was not just poetry, it was survival. Every harvest depended on her, every wall rested on her strength. But Gaia, though vast, was lonely. She was the ground, but she longed for a sky to cover her. So from herself she brought forth Ouranos, the sky, starry and immense. He was her counterpart, her balance. Earth and sky together made the middle space in which life could grow. Gaia lay below, steady and fertile. Ouranos stretched above, protective and watchful. Between them stretched the air, the place where humans would one day live, dream and breathe. Gaia also gave birth to the mountains, those stony guardians that rose between earth and heaven. She gave birth to Pontus, the sea, vast and deep, the endless frontier of waves. From the very start, she was more than ground. She was the great mother of landscapes, the one who shaped the geography of the cosmos. Yet even in these first births, the Greeks showed us something profound. Creation is not neat. It is not final. It unfolds in layers. Earth brings forth sky, mountains, sea, and in each new child is the seed of both harmony and conflict. The sky will become both partner and oppressor. The mountains will both shelter and isolate. The sea will both feed and drown. From the start, creation was ambiguous, both gift and danger. Pause here, dear listener, and imagine it. The earth waking, rising from the void, hills swelling like the curves of a body, rivers threading like veins, the sea surging at her edges, breathing salt, the sky arching above, scattered with stars. It is not yet the world we know. No sun, no moon, no mortals. Only forms, raw and immense, taking their places. Gaia is the womb of everything. She will bear the Titans, who will shape the ages. She will suffer their weight within her, pressed down by the fear of their father. She will cry out, and in her pain she will plot the first rebellion. In her we see the double face of motherhood, the giver of life and the one who suffers because of it. The Greeks knew this truth well. Every mother gives life with struggle. Every birth carries pain. Every generation rises on the strength and the sacrifice of the one before it. Gaia was not only a goddess of soil and harvest, she was the archetype of endurance itself. She bore much, and from her groans came change. Even Zeus, when he becomes king of the gods, will swear oaths on Gaia. Even the most powerful Olympian will not escape her. For earth is older than sky, older than storm, older than lightning. She is the base upon which all thrones stand. As you drift deeper into this story, reflect on how the Greeks understood the ground beneath their feet. To them, it was not passive, it was alive. When they prayed, they did not only look upward to the heavens, they also looked downward, pouring libations into the soil, calling Gaia's name. To live was to be held between two presences, Ouranos above, Gaia below. Sky and earth, watching, sheltering, and sometimes restraining. Gaia's awakening is the start of all relationships in Greek myth. She will love, she will grieve, she will rage. Her children will fill the world with strife and beauty alike. And though later myths place the Olympians high on Olympus, Gaia never disappears. She remains steady and quiet under every city, under every temple, under every battlefield. Close your eyes and feel her presence. The ground beneath you, steady, unyielding, patient. That is Gaia, the first to awaken, the one who endures when all else falls. We have watched Gaia awaken from the void, stretching herself wide to become the earth, shaping mountains and seas, preparing a place for life. But earth, though vast and strong, was not complete. She longed for a counterpart, someone to balance her, someone to cover her, to press against her, so the middle space of existence might take shape. And so from herself, Gaia brought forth Ouranos, the sky. Ouranos was immense, a dome glittering with stars. He was not separate from Gaia, not born from another god, but drawn up out of her, like breath leaving lungs. He was her partner, her covering, her counterpart. If Gaia was foundation, Ouranos was shelter. Together they formed the first cosmic couple, the union of earth and sky. The Greeks did not imagine this union as distant or abstract. They pictured the sky lying close upon the earth, covering her completely, pressing against her body. Their embrace was constant. Their closeness created a fertile abundance, for from earth and sky came the first generation of powerful beings. These children were the Titans, 12 in number, 6 sons and 6 daughters. Among them were names that would echo through all Greek myth: Oceanus, the river that encircled the world; Hyperion, light of the sun, and his sister Thea, bright as dawn; Krios, Iapetus, Mnemosyne the memory, Themis the order, Phoebe of shining intellect, Tethys the nurturing sea, and Rhea, who would one day give birth to the Olympians themselves. And last among the brothers was Kronos, youngest and most cunning. But the Titans were not alone. Gaia and Ouranos also bore the Cyclopes, one-eyed giants whose gaze burned like lightning. Brontes, Steropes and Arges, they were smiths of thunder, embodiments of storm. Their single eyes flashed with the fire of the sky. And then came the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones, Kotos, Briareos and Gyges. Each with 100 hands and 50 heads, they were beings of such terrible power that even the earth herself groaned under their weight. They were chaos given form, too immense to imagine, stronger than any army. Already, the family of earth and sky was crowded, powerful and strange. But Ouranos looked upon his children and felt fear. Perhaps it was their strength, greater than his. Perhaps it was their strangeness, too wild to control. Perhaps it was the simple truth that in myth, every father fears the rise of his sons. Whatever the reason, Ouranos acted with cruelty. He forced his children back into Gaia's depths. Each Titan, each Cyclops, each 100-handed one, he pressed them down into the womb of their mother, burying them inside the earth. Gaia groaned in agony, her body stretched and torn by the weight of her children locked within her. The earth was no longer fertile with joy, but swollen with pain. This was the first oppression, the first injustice. And it came not from chaos, not from monsters, but from fear. The sky, who should have sheltered the earth, became her tormentor. Their union, once fertile, became violent. The earth suffered, the children suffocated, and the world groaned. Pause here and notice the pattern the Greeks give us. Creation and conflict are never separate. The same embrace that produces life also produces fear. The same Father who gives existence tries to take it away. Every act of love carries within it the seed of struggle. Gaia endured, but she did not forget. In her depths, she began to form a plan. She could not bear the weight forever. She would act, and in her plotting, we glimpse the Greek understanding of power. It is never permanent, never secure. Every ruler, even the sky itself, trembles before the prophecy of rebellion. But that belongs to the next chapter. For now, rest with the image of earth and sky pressed together, the first family struggling within, the groans of Gaia echoing beneath the surface. This is not yet the war of gods and titans, not yet the rise of Olympus. It is simply the first truth, that creation, even in heaven and earth, is tangled with fear. Close your eyes. Imagine the night sky lying close upon the ground, stars brushing the hills, valleys aching beneath the weight of imprisoned children. The world holds its breath. Something is coming. Out of the union of Gaia and Ouranos came the first generation of truly powerful beings, the Titans. 12 in number, they stood as the pillars of the world's first dynasty, each carrying qualities that would shape both cosmos and culture. The eldest was Oceanus, the great river that encircled the entire earth. To the Greeks, the sea was not endless chaos, but a flowing current, a boundary that separated known land from the unknown beyond. Oceanus was that river given form, a titan whose embrace defined the limits of the world. His presence reminded mortals that their lives took place within boundaries, lands to cultivate, seas to cross, but always edges beyond which mystery remained. Beside him stood Tethys, nurturing and maternal, the titaness of fresh waters, springs and rivers. From her flowed the streams that fed valleys, the fountains that made fields fertile. Together, Oceanus and Tethys gave rise to thousands of river gods and sea nymphs, populating every brook and bay with divine presence. There was Hyperion, the titan of heavenly light, paired with Thea, bright and radiant. From them would come the sun, the moon, and the dawn, Helios, Selene, and Eos, whose journeys across the sky gave rhythm to human life. Kronos, a titan of constellations, marked the turning points of the heavens, while Phoebe, radiant intellect, was linked to prophecy and wisdom. Themis, embodiment of divine law and right order, represented justice that predated even Zeus, while Mnemosyne, memory herself, preserved all stories. From her union with Zeus would later be born the Muses, the wellspring of song and inspiration. Iapetus, stern and shadowed, fathered figures who embodied the mortal condition. Prometheus, foresight and trickery. Epimetheus, afterthought. Atlas, condemned to hold the heavens on his shoulders. And Menoetius, struck down for hubris. Through Iapetus, the Titan's legacy reached directly into the fate of humankind. And then there was Rhea, the great mother, who would one day bear the Olympians. And Kronos, the youngest, the most cunning, and the one who would change everything. Alongside the Titans came other children of Gaia and Ouranos, the Cyclopes, one-eyed giants of thunder and fire, named Brontes, Steropes, and Arges. Each bore a single blazing eye in the middle of the forehead, a vision like lightning, a gaze that pierced darkness. They were smiths of divine weapons, embodiments of storm, beings who carried in their single eye the fire of heaven. And more terrible still were the Hecatonchires, the hundred-handed ones, Kotos, Briareos, and Gyges. Each had 50 heads and 100 arms, immense beyond imagining. Their strength was so great, their presence so heavy, that even Gaia groaned beneath their weight. They were the raw force of chaos given flesh, too powerful for the balance of the early world. This was the first family, vast, strange, beautiful, and frightening. They were not yet Olympians, not yet familiar gods of temples and cults. They were primal beings, closer to the raw forces of nature than to the anthropomorphic figures we think of when we say God. The Titans embodied rivers, memory, law, and light. The Cyclops embodied storm and fire. The hundred-handed ones embodied sheer, unrestrained power. Ouranos looked upon them and feared. It is easy to imagine why. Each child carried within it a potency that could rival even the sky itself. The Titans with their intelligence, the Cyclops with their fire, the hundred-handed ones with their monstrous strength. Together, they were too much. And so, Ouranos began to press them down, forcing them back into Gaia, burying them inside the earth. The earth groaned with pain. She had borne them, and now she bore their weight inside her. Her body swelled with the struggle, her soil split with agony. Creation had turned against itself. What was fertile became suffocating. What was union became oppression. The story pauses here, heavy with tension. The children of earth and sky, full of potential, are trapped beneath the surface. Gaia suffers. The sky looms above, fearful and cruel. Something must give. And in the silence of this suffering, the seeds of rebellion are already taking root. Close your eyes. Imagine the night sky lying close upon the ground, stars brushing the hills, valleys aching beneath the weight of imprisoned children. The world holds its breath. Something is coming. The first family did not grow in a cradle. It grew in a pressure. Ouranos lay across Gaia like a lid fixed tight upon a jar, and everything she had brought into being, Titans, Cyclopes, hundred-handed ones, was pressed downward, forced back into the very body that had borne them. Creation became weight. Weight became pain. Imagine the earth as the Greeks imagined her, not an object, but a living breath. Caves that are lungs, faults that are ribs, plains that are the soft of the belly. In those depths the children struggled, not yet separate from their mother, not yet permitted to stand beneath the sky. The Titans in their intelligence, the Cyclopes with their smoldering eye, the hundred-handed ones with a force like storms compressed, each pushed against the walls that held them. Gaia groaned. The sound of that groaning was the old explanation for earthquakes, the world muttering under strain, the body of earth shifting to bear what was never meant to be contained. It is important that this first injustice is not a foreign invasion, it is intimate. The harm comes not from monsters without, but from fear within the family. Ouranos is not protecting Gaia. He is silencing her. He will not let the new stand beneath him because the new is powerful. In myth, as in life, the first tyrant is often the parent who cannot imagine a future in which he is not the center. Beneath the ground, the imprisoned children push and whisper. Think of Oceanus feeling the urge to flow, yet stalled, his rivers not yet laid upon the land. Think of Hyperion's bright tendency, sun and moon not yet unhooked from darkness, wheels still unmade. Think of Mnemosyne, memory without events to hold. Themis, law without a polis to order. Phoebe, mind without a sky of thought to roam. Everything they are has been asserted, and yet nothing can happen. That is what oppression is in the first language of myth, potential without movement. Gaia feels each shove like a bruise. Night after night, though night here is still only Nyx's shawl, she measures the weight of her silence. The sky is flush to her skin. There is no corridor of air for words to escape. The younger among the buried children, Kronos especially, learn patience as a kind of weapon. Older ones learn endurance. The hundred-handed ones learn how to curl power inward, like a storm held in a small room. The Cyclopes learn how to keep a fire banked beneath stone. Above, Ouranos keeps his vigil of fear. He visits Gaia and, in visiting, seals the press again. He does not speak to the children. He refuses even to acknowledge their faces, which is one of the oldest forms of denial. He will not let them be seen. He knows the prophecy that shadows every father in Greek myth without anyone yet saying it, that what you push down will one day rise, that revolt is built into time, the way dawn is built into night. Between sky and earth, the middle air has no stories yet. There are no mountains high enough to pry them apart, no trees to hold the space open. The only living things that move here are the first feelings, Gaia's pain, Ouranos' fear, and the trembling resolve down below that grows like a root searching for stone to split. In later centuries, Greek families would make oaths on the ground itself, pour libations into the soil, and call Gaia to witness. This is partly why, because the earth remembers. She remembers the early injustice. She remembers the press of the unacknowledged. She remembers the day she resolved to act. Resolve does not come to Gaia as rage first. It comes as necessity. The Greeks loved words like ananke, the compulsion of what must be. Gaia does not plot like a schemer at a court. She plots like a mother who cannot suffer another night of her children suffocating in her body. She takes inventory of what she has, breadth, endurance, the knowledge of hidden passages, and the gift of making things from herself. From these, she will fashion an answer. But before a tool, she fashions a question. She asks her children, silently at first, then with a voice that hums through stone, "Who among you will help me? Who will lift this lid? Who will stand between sky and earth and cut a passage for life?" She does not need all of them. She needs one with the right mixture of courage and cunning, one who can bear the curse that will surely follow such an act. The answers rise through her like bubbles. The 100-handed ones are strength without direction. They could tear, but not yet strike with purpose. The Cyclopes carry lightning in a single eye, but their spark requires a world already open to thunder. The elder Titans are heavy with qualities that will matter later: law, memory, mind. But law cannot arbitrate a prison it did not choose. Memory cannot store a future not yet born. It is the youngest, Kronos, who sharpens into focus. Youth in Greek myth is not innocence. It is the willingness to do what the elders will not. Even before he agrees, Kronos senses the shape of cost. The Greeks are severe about reciprocity. To sever is to be severed. To overthrow is to live under the threat of overthrow. But the young are not moved by the geometry of consequence. They are moved by the urgency of now. Kronos listens to his mother's plan, and in listening he becomes the first instrument of time, the first hand that measures moments by dividing one age from the next. For Gaia has more than a plan. She has begun to construct a tool. In her deep rock where metals dream, she imagines a blade, hard enough to insult the sky. Hesiod will call it stuff, adamant, a substance poets reach for when ordinary iron will not do, stone so irreducible that even fear cannot blunt it. As she shapes it, the earth makes an unfamiliar sound, not groaning this time, but a delicate bright ring, like the spine of a thing that is allowed at last to stand. While she works, she also teaches. She instructs Kronos in hiding, in patience, in the way pressure itself can be turned from burden into spring. She shows him where to stand, what angle the blade must find, when to wait, when to move. This is not a riot, it is a surgery. The Greeks will repeatedly use cutting as a metaphor for founding, dividing fields, laws, even syllables. Here, the first cut will found the space where history can happen. Meanwhile, Ouranos continues as though nothing beneath him could ever change. That is the nature of tyrannies. They confuse stillness with safety. He believes that because he has always pressed, he can always press. He mistakes Gaia's quiet for consent. He does not notice that quiet can be a weapon, that patience can be a stored blade. Down below, the imprisoned children feel the change without knowing its plan. The 100-handed ones flex in their confinement, and the earth does not groan as much. The cyclopes open and close their single eyes, and darkness seems less absolute. Titans whisper names for things that do not yet exist, harbor city lore as if anticipating futures that require air. Memory practices remembering, order practices ordering. Even Oceanus dreams of coasts. Above, night and darkness draw their veil again and again, and in that rhythm desire continues to hum. Eros, who first leaned thing toward thing, now leans action toward action. Wanting gathers to a point. The old fear of the father thickens the air. The new daring of the son sharpens it. Gaia's hands, if the earth can be said to have hands, finish their work. The tool shines with a light that is not sunlight. It is the clean gleam of an edge that has never touched anything. She hides it where stone meets skin. She shows Kronos how to hold it. She whispers to him the cost and does not soften it. He nods the way the young nod, half understanding, wholly decided. Before the act, there is a stillness so complete, it cannot last. Ouranos bends low again to cover Gaia, to force the children back into their old position. He is confident from repetition. Kronos waits where his mother set him, not with the tremor of a coward, but with the steadiness of someone who has rehearsed every motion in the privacy of his mind. Gaia does not move. She has already moved enough. She has made the space inside herself where courage can stand. The chapter ends, for now, at the breath before contact. The sky lowering, the earth holding, the sun ready. Violence is not yet done. It is loaded. The burden within has gathered itself to answer the hand that caused it. When the answer comes, it will be more than a wound. It will be a clearing, a line cut into the world through which seasons, cities, and stories can pass. In the next part, the blade will fall. The blood of the sky will seed new beings, and the prophecy that has lain like a shadow over all fathers will find its first proof. But the truth to hold here is simpler. Oppression teaches pressure. Pressure teaches leverage. Leverage teaches the art by which even a sky can be moved. The weight of Ouranos pressed endlessly upon Gaia. Each night he descended, covering her body, smothering the space between earth and sky. Each day, the Titans, Cyclopes, and 100-handed ones remained trapped inside her, their strength and voices muffled by layers of stone. The world groaned, not with storms or winds, but with the anguish of the earth herself. It was in this groaning that the first rebellion was born. Gaia's suffering could no longer remain silence. Pain became intention, and intention became plan. She would not endure forever. She would not allow her children to remain prisoners within her body. Something had to change. Gaia bent her will to creation. She shaped from her own substance a sickle of unyielding stone, a curved blade of adamant, sharp and terrible, unlike anything the world had yet seen. It was the first crafted weapon, the first tool born not only of necessity, but of revolt. But a weapon alone was not enough. Gaia turned to her children, whispering to them through the darkness of her body. She spoke of her plan, of the sickle she had made, of the moment that must come when Ouranos descended once again. She asked who among them would dare to act, who would risk facing the sky itself. At first, all was silent. The Titans shifted in unease, their courage blunted by the enormity of the task. To strike at their father, to wound the very heavens, was a thought too vast, too dangerous. Even the 100-handed ones, mighty as they were, hesitated, for their strength had no direction without will. Then, in the stillness, one voice rose. Kronos, the youngest of the Titans. Kronos was cunning where his siblings were cautious, bold where they were restrained. He did not flinch from Gaia's plan. He understood what it meant. to sever, to divide, to cut open a space where there had been only pressure and closeness. He agreed to act. Gaia's heart swelled with grim resolve. She placed the sickle in Kronos' hand and gave him her blessing. The earth herself had chosen her champion, not the strongest, not the wisest, but the one most willing to act when others shrank away. The plan was simple. When Ouranos next descended to cover Gaia, Kronos would lie in wait. Guided by his mother's resolve, he would strike, and in striking, he would change the cosmos forever. The moment came. Night veiled the world as Nyx spread her shawl of darkness. Ouranos descended as he always had, confident in his power, pressing his weight upon Gaia, suppressing the children within her. But this time, the earth was ready. Kronos reached from his hiding place. With one swift motion, he brought down the sickle. The blade struck true. Ouranos cried out as the sickle severed him. Blood spilled, falling upon Gaia's soil, soaking into her, seeding the world with new and terrible forms. From the drops that touched the earth sprang the Erinyes, the Furies, goddesses of vengeance, dark-winged and unrelenting. Giants rose as well, fierce and towering, their strength born from blood. And from the foam that gathered where Ouranos' severed flesh fell into the sea, another being would emerge, Aphrodite, goddess of beauty. And desire, her radiance rising from the waves near the shores of Cyprus. Creation, once again, was mingled with violence. From pain came beauty, from blood came vengeance. The Greeks saw no contradiction in this. To them, life was always both fertile and dangerous, both tender and cruel. Ouranos, wounded and dethroned, withdrew. But before he vanished, he uttered a curse. He foretold that Kronos, who had overthrown his father, would himself be overthrown by his own child. The prophecy of succession was spoken, and from that moment it haunted every generation of gods. Gaia's groaning ceased, but not her role. She had created space between earth and sky, between generations. The world now had room to breathe. The Titans were free, the cosmos had shifted, and a new order had begun. But Kronos, though victorious, was not free of fear. His father's curse echoed in his mind, whispering that what he had done to Ouranos, another would one day do to him. Suspicion and dread took root, and soon the cycle of oppression and rebellion would begin again. The cry of Gaia had been answered, the sickle had fallen, and the first dynasty had ended, but the prophecy ensured that no dynasty would ever last. A new order stood in the space that the sickle had opened. The sky no longer lay pressed against the earth. Air moved between them. Stars kept their distance. Kronos lifted the dripping blade, and for the first time since beginnings, there was room. In that room, he placed himself. The Titans, unburied, took their stations. Oceanus began to circle the land like a slow thought around a problem. Tethys loosed her rivers along the new grooves of the world. Hyperion's bright lineage rehearsed the first roots of sun and moon. Themis felt the fit of things and nodded. Mnemosyne gathered the first stories like seeds in her palm, and Rhea, the great-hearted, stood beside Kronos as queen. Mortals later called this span the Golden Age of Kronos. Fields yielded without compulsion, fruit bent branches without the ache of labor. No one yet counted years. The scythe was not for harvest, but for a memory older than grain. The air was young and mild. The Greeks would speak of it often, not as a place to return to, but as a comparison for what was lost. The Golden Age is always an after, a sigh backwards, a wish forward. Even in myth, paradise is a story you tell from outside it. Kronos sat at the center of that abundance and felt the hairline crack the prophecy had left in him. Ouranos' curse did not fade with victory, it sharpened with it. To dethrone a father is to inherit his fear. Kronos had divided a world, now he lived divided within himself. King above, trembling below. He could seed festivals, but not ease. The sickle that had parted sky and earth had also cut a thin line through his sleep. In that unease, he did a thing that made the next war certain. Children came to Rhea, first Hestia, hearth and its steady flame, then Demeter, green surge of grain, then Hera, dignity and the law of the marriage bed, then Hades, the gravity of below, then Poseidon, surge and quake. Each time Rhea wrapped an infant in swaddling, Kronos remembered the taste of victory and the word his father hurled like a spear. You too. He would not be surprised in his turn. He would not one day feel a hand at his throne the way he had placed a hand upon the sky. He opened his mouth and swallowed each newborn whole. The poets do not soften it. They do not say he hid them in a cave or banished them to a mist. He ate them, and yet they remained alive inside him, as if Kronos had become the very prison Ouranos once made of Gaia. The new king was not an improvement on the old, he was the old, turned inward. Rhea's grief had no audience. She carried a basin of milk to a mouth that was also a maw. She wrapped linen around wrists that would never reach for her. She knew the names of her children and spoke them into a darkness that answered with the sound of swallowing. Her sisters tried to comfort her with order and memory, but order cannot bless a room where the cradle is a mouth, and memory hurts when nothing yet has happened. Rhea looked at the ground for help. The ground remembered. Gaia and the sky, old enemies, found for a moment a shared cause. The earth had groaned under oppression and had learned how to shape a tool. She could not watch this new choke tighten around the future. Ouranos, his wound still ringing in the air, understood that what he had feared had been trimmed, but not uprooted. They counseled Rhea as they had once counseled Kronos: hide, deceive, preserve. The next child quickened. Rhea's body knew the rhythm of 5 losses and the rolling dread that marked the 6th. Somewhere in Crete, the caves of Dicte and Ida kept the right kind of darkness, one that shelters, not smothers. Rhea traveled there under night, when Nyx's shawl is thickest, and even prophecy sleeps a little. She found a chamber veined like a leaf, a place whose silence felt like promise, and there she bore a son. The air in that cave felt different. Not the stillness of fear, but the hush that attends beginnings. She named him Zeus. The plan asked for swaddling and for stone. Gaia herself shaped a rock into the weight and shape of an infant, cold and uncomplaining. Rhea wrapped it in cloth with hands that shook and did the cruelest kind of courage. She carried the decoy to the one who had eaten the real children and held it up as if it were her son. Kronos took the bundle, felt the familiar weight, and made the familiar choice. He opened his mouth and swallowed. The linen slid, the rock fell, the fear dimmed, not gone, never gone, but dulled by the false impression of control that tyrants mistake for safety. Back in the cave, the work of preserving began. Nymphs with names that sound like leaves and water, Adrasteia, Ida, took turns at the cradle. Bees found the newborn's lips. The goat Amalthea bent her neck, milk made breath into strength. In some tellings, Zeus broke a horn while clinging to her, and the broken curve became the cornucopia, a promise that fullness can come from fracture. The curetes, young men who danced like soldiers and drum like storms, kept time with their shields, clashing bronze against bronze, so that Kronos would hear only festival and never the child's cry. Noise saved silence. Ruse saved truth. The sky, for once, did not press. Zeus grew at cave speed, which is faster than years and slower than fate. He learned the shape of stone and the sound of bronze. He learned the smell of goats and the kindness of small hands. He learned the pattern his father had made and the one his mother had cut into it. When he looked up at the slit of sky visible at the cave mouth, he did not see a god to worship. He saw a roof that could be lifted. Far away, on a shelf in the dark of Kronos' belly, the swallowed children existed in a strange suspension. The hearth's first quiet, Hestia, kept a rim of warmth that made the place survivable. Demeter stored a memory of season, a whisper that not all hunger lasts. Hera held herself upright in a dignity that would not rot. Hades learned the gravity of confinement and became its shape. Poseidon practiced patience the way water does, in place but always pressing. Inside the devourer, the devoured prepared to become whole. The myth's insistence that they lived has always mattered. Greek time can delay, but it rarely deletes. Even swallowed, the future waits. Kronos ruled. He heard prophecies and ordered sacrifices. He rewarded loyalty and punished guesses. Festivals were held in his honor, and some said the earth remembered his age fondly, but the center of his life tasted of stone. He had made his stomach into a tomb and called it safety. Even his victories were things he could not show anyone. The proof of his prudence was a silence only he could hear. Tyranny is lonely. The only witness to its success is the tyrant's fear. The story does not hurry. It lingers in this poise because the Greeks valued the intervals where pressure coalesces. They knew that revolt is not only a leap, it is also an education. Zeus learned not only strength, but timing. He grew, and with growth came allies. Gaia, who had seen this pattern once already and would gladly see it reversed. Metis, a goddess whose name means cunning intelligence, who would one day mix a draught that turned swallowing into vomit. The Cyclopes, when freed, who would hammer thunder into the hand that would lift it. The 100-handed, who would find in open air a use for their impossible number of arms. But for the moment, the cave holds, the goat feeds, the shields ring. Rhea keeps her secret long enough to let a boy turn into the kind of man who can hear both a mother's grief and a world's need without breaking under either. When he leaves Crete, he will not go to a palace. He will go to the problem his father built and solve it with the only answer that ever frees anyone in these old stories. Not a wish, but a counteraction that reverses the harm exactly. One sign of the gods, seriousness about oaths, appears in a small gesture after the trick with the stone. Kronos, lulled by the weight he has swallowed, sets the swaddled rock aside in pride when it returns to the light again, and Zeus will one day place that same stone at Delphi, the omphalos, the navel of the world, so that a community of worshippers can put their hand on deceit made harmless, and remember that even lies can be glued into truth if they are exposed and set where everyone can see them. A myth loves to turn a crime into an altar. This is Kronos' act in full, to conquer fear with prevention until prevention becomes the new prison, to parent by eating, to reign by refusal. It looks like stability from far away. Up close, it is a hallway with no doors. The Golden Age shines, but it shines on fields, not on the inside of the king. What stands against it is small and precise. A cave, a goat, a ring of dancers, a rock wrapped in cloth, a mother's refusal to hand over the last of her future, a boy taught to listen to bronze until he can hear the moment to move. In Greek stories, rescue rarely looks like a miracle. It looks like craft and care stacked patiently until the weight they bear begins to shift. The edge of the next act is already visible. Metis will bring a cup. Kronos will drink, not knowing that the one habit he has trusted, taking things into himself, has been turned into its antidote. One by one the swallowed will rise not from graves, but from a mouth. They will land on their feet, not because gravity prefers them, but because time has run out for the one who thought he could eat it. For now the cave breathes. The stone remembers the taste of a king. The prophecy sits patient as a hunter watching a clearing. The world understands what it has learned twice in a row, that every order contains its opposite, and that fear, when it swallows, only stores what will one day make it fall. The sickle had fallen. The cry of Ouranos still lingered, echoing in the gaps between earth and sky. Blood darkened the soil, and from that blood, new presences took shape. Where drops fell, the Erinyes emerged, winged avengers with serpents in their hair, furies who would forever haunt those who spilled family blood. From other drops sprang the giants, fierce and towering, their strength a living memory of the wound that had been struck. From the mingling of foam and flesh cast into the sea, another wonder rose. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty and desire, borne on the waves to the shore of Cyprus. This mixture of vengeance and beauty was no contradiction for the Greeks. Violence and creation walked hand in hand. Every cut opened a space where something new could live. Every wound seeded new forms. From the sky's blood, the world gained both terror and delight. To them, this was truth. The cosmos itself was tragic, fertile, and dangerous all at once. Ouranos, broken, withdrew from the world. But before he passed into silence, he uttered a curse that would shape every age to come. He condemned his son, saying, "As I have been overthrown by you, so too will you be overthrown by your own child." With those words, the prophecy of succession was fixed. No dynasty could last forever. Every ruler would live under the shadow of replacement. Every father would look at his son with a flicker of fear. Kronos held the sickle, now stained, and stood in the space he had created. He was king, master of the Titans, lord of the world. The air was open, the earth breathed. For a while, it seemed that peace might follow. But the curse of Ouranos hung heavy, as sharp as the blade Kronos still carried. It is said that in Kronos' reign, mortals lived in what was later remembered as the Golden Age. The earth gave freely. No plough tore the soil, no wars disturbed the peace, no age brought decay. Men lived as if time itself was kind. They did not grow old, and when they died, it was as if they simply drifted into sleep. To later Greeks, this age was not a literal past, but an image, a myth of innocence before the weight of toil and death. It was the dream of abundance without cost. Yet even in this age of gold, fear gnawed at the heart of the king. Kronos had overthrown his father. He had felt the prophecy spoken with the last breath of Ouranos. He knew the pattern of rebellion, because he had been the rebel. The shadow of the curse followed him into every meal, every embrace, every silence. He feared his own children. When his queen, Rhea, bore their first child, Kronos remembered his father's words. He looked upon the infant, Hestia, and saw not a daughter, but a threat. To prevent his own downfall, Kronos opened his mouth and swallowed her whole. Rhea's cry echoed Gaia's groan, but the deed was done. One by one, as Rhea bore them, each child was taken and consumed. Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. None were allowed to grow, none were allowed to stand. They lived, if living it could be called, within their father's belly, waiting. Kronos believed he had silenced the prophecy, but he had only repeated it. Like Ouranos pressing his children into the earth, Kronos made himself into a prison. The pattern had begun again. And so Rhea despaired. Her womb carried children not into the world, but into the maw of their father. She walked the halls of the Titans alone, her arms empty, her grief unspoken. She could no longer trust Kronos, yet she could not undo what had been done, until, at last, she resolved to act. When her sixth child was born, she turned not to her husband, but to the earth itself. She cried out to Gaia, who remembered what it was to be burdened by children trapped within. Gaia guided Rhea, whispering a plan, as she had once whispered to Kronos. This time, when the child was born, Rhea did not present him to Kronos. Instead, she hid the newborn in a cave on the island of Crete. Nymphs watched over him, and the goat Amalthea nourished him with milk. The Curetes, young warriors clad in bronze, clashed their shields together in ritual dance to drown out the sound of the infant's cries. This child, unseen, unheard, was Zeus. To deceive Kronos, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and presented it as if it were her son. Without hesitation, Kronos swallowed the rock, believing he had once again secured his throne. He did not notice the trick. He did not realize that the prophecy had already slipped past him, hidden in a cave, waiting to grow. The rock remained inside him, lodged and heavy, a false satisfaction. It would later be set upon the earth at Delphi as the omphalos, the navel of the world, a reminder that even deception could become sacred when it carried the weight of fate. And so, though Kronos reigned, his downfall was already moving toward him. The child he had missed, hidden in the shadows, would one day rise against him. The cycle of fear and rebellion, father and son, continued. The blood of Ouranos had sown vengeance and prophecy. The reign of Kronos had begun in violence and was already cracking under its own fear. The golden age gleamed, but beneath its light the seeds of war and change were already planted. The prophecy would not be denied. In the cave, the child fed and listened. Bronze on bronze from the curettes rang like weather, a steady clatter that taught the ear to count courage. Goat's milk thickened his limbs. Honey taught his tongue the idea of sweetness. Stone kept its counsel. Zeus learned the shapes of patience and the way a ceiling can be mistaken for a sky. He learned, too, that ceilings can be lifted. Gifts came quietly, as most saving things do. From Gaia, the memory of how to turn burden into leverage. From Rhea, a mother's resolve sharpened by loss. From Metis, whose name is cunning wrapped in care, the art of turning an enemy's habit into his medicine. The nymphs Adrastea and Ida carried him from cool to warmth, shade to sun, so that his bones learned the world as a sequence of gentlenesses. The cave did not make him small, it made him ready. When he could hold a plan without letting it spill, Zeus went first not to a throne, but to a kitchen, Metis's realm of mixtures. There the goddess set about compounding a draught that would teach swallowing to reverse itself. It would be no poison, just a precise invitation. Give back what you took. Zeus took the cup, as unceremonious as a son, bringing water to a father who does not know he is thirsty. He returned to the house of the Titans, like weather changing. Kronos, lulled by the stone he had swallowed, and by the rehearsed quiet his fear had made of every room, accepted the cup as if it were obedience. He drank. The body that had turned children into cargo answered to the oldest logic. Everything taken must one day be carried out again. It begins not with a scream, but with a convulsion, the proud body learning a humbler motion. First came the stone, wrapped in cloth, clattering to light like a rumor hardened into proof. Then one by one, not as ghosts but as whole presences, the swallowed returned. Hestia, small steady flame that makes a room a room. Demeter, with the smell of grain after rain. Hera, standing already as if she had always been a queen. Hades, whose gaze was patient, having learned the shape of confinement. Poseidon, with a rhythm in him like surf, withdraw, strike, withdraw. Last came the child Kronos had feared unnamed, and when Zeus stood among his siblings, the space itself seemed to find its purpose. The six looked at one another with the astonishment of a reunion that feels like a beginning. Swallowing had not erased them. It had only delayed them. This is one of myth's oldest mercies. Time can be held at bay. What must be can wait and still be itself. Zeus did not waste the new-made breath on triumph. He turned at once to freeing what fear had buried deeper still. He went down to Tartarus, where the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones lay under locks layered like winter. Locks open for many reasons. Zeus brought the one they had lacked, a promise backed by act. The 100-handed rose, joints cracking like boulders shifting. The Cyclops opened their single eyes, and the first thing each eye saw was a god with an outstretched hand. There are gifts only the grateful can give. In payment for release, the Cyclopes made 3 emblems that have stood ever since for what the 3 brothers are in essence. To Zeus, the thunderbolt, a light that does justice faster than a speech. To Poseidon, the trident, the triple-toothed insistence of the sea. To Hades, the helm of invisibility, the art by which power acts without spectacle. They place the things in the brothers' hands not as toys, but as answers to the world. S3 stubbornnesses. Sky, water, below. Word travels through families faster than through armies. Styx, the underworld river who had already felt in herself the weight of unbreakable oath, came first with her children. Zelos, emulation's spur. Nike, victory. Kratos, strength. Bia, force, and pledged them to Zeus. He swore in return that all gods henceforth would swear their truest oaths by Styx, the water that binds even immortals. This is how new orders announce themselves, not by louder boasts, but by founding an oath. Others moved. Themis came, law older than any king, because what was happening was not merely a revolt, but a refitting of things to their rightful measure. Mnemosyne followed, because every new age needs a keeper of what must not be forgotten. Some titans stayed with Kronos out of loyalty or fear. Others held back. Oceanus kept to his circle, disinclined toward quarrels that could break coasts. Prometheus, grandson of Iapetus, watched the weather of the war gather and turned his thoughts toward what this would mean for the new, fragile race that would be called human. Sides form partly from reason, partly from temperament. The poem remembers both. Lines drew themselves across mountains, Mount Olympus for the Titans, Mount Olympus for the young gods who were not yet called Olympians, but stood there because a high place clarifies. Between them lay the plain that would learn to tremble at a 10-year rhythm, the poet's number for the duration that feels both long and rememberable. The earth had already suffered press and cut. She braced now for impact. The first clash sounded like the name of the war that still rings. Titanomachy, the struggle with the Titans. Stone against stone, thunder against ancestral strength. The air filled with projectiles too large to be called stones and too small to be called mountains. The 100-handed learned how to throw a hill as if it were a discus. Kronos brandished the sickle that had unmade a sky. Zeus lifted the bolt that makes an answer of light. Poseidon's trident found the seams in cliffs and taught them to be waves. Hades moved unseen where fear clumps in the back of throats and loosened it into panic at decisive moments. Hera's command steadied ranks. Demeter kept the ground on their side. Hestia never let the campfire go out. On the Titan's ridge, Kronos marked the courses of their assaults by the constellations he knew so well. Hyperion strode brilliant and terrible, and for a while it looked as if light itself preferred the older order. Iapetus struck hard with the resentment of those who believe their dignity has been mismeasured. Atlas, strong enough to be asked to hold anything, proved strong enough to be asked to hold everything, and began to learn the cost of a back that never puts anything down. The war did not move like a single storm. It pulsed, assaults, retreats, treaties attempted and broken, speeches that would have filled halls if anyone had the leisure to listen. Above it all, Zeus practiced the skill that would make him king in more than name: distribution. He knew where to send force and where to recall it, when to strike with noise, and when to let Hades quiet undo more than an army sees. He placed Nike where doubt gathered, Kratos where will flagged, Bia where a door would not open. He asked Themis not to bless the cause, law is not a pet, but to advise where victory would become simply a new form of the harm they fought. He did not wish to become Kronos with better branding. When momentum sagged, Zeus remembered a promise to depth. He sent for the Hecatoncheires, not as symbols, but as artillery. They took positions where the line had crusted over into stalemate. Each lifted, in each hand, rocks that villages later would have called hills, and hurled them with a rhythm that only those born with 100 hands could keep, one that turns resistance into rubble by the mathematics of relentlessness. The Titans learned that even ancient strength tires when it is asked to catch a storm made of stone. At one point, poets disagree when the earth opened as if surprised at what weight can do when it is taught to move. From the split came a roar different from thunder, a compound of winds and serpents and insult. Typhon would have his day later. Even his rumour turned shields to bells. Zeus steadied the ranks with the simplest of gestures. He stood. Sometimes a god need only be seen in the right place with the right face. Not all the action was loud. Metis moved like water through council, pouring boldness into caution without spilling either. Styx kept the oaths pure. When a Titan's promise broke, a corner of the field broke with it, as if the ground itself prefers truth and will not carry lies without charging extra gravity. 10 years wear any war into habit, and habit turns courage into fatigue. What difference held the young gods from collapse was the quality of their hope. Not the hope that says, we cannot fail, but the kind that says, we will not stop working until what must be stands. It is a quieter hope and therefore harder to kill. At last, the war began to tilt. The Cyclopes had tuned the thunder to Zeus's hand. The 100-handed had taught the air to expect stones. The older Titans had spent their first force and were spending now their names. The ground that had groaned under oppression, and then under cutting, and then under battle, felt a new sensation. The shift that means an age is rolling over. Kronos met Zeus in a silence between clangors. The sickle that had once cut a father now glinted like a relic. The bolt that had been a gift now looked like a right. They struck, not just each other, but the idea that a world can be kept by swallowing it. The brightness that followed is what poets call lightning when they are not being literal. It is the light of recognition, the moment a pattern sees itself and breaks. The Titans fell back toward the only depth deep enough to hold them, Tartarus. Chains the size of biases and the weight of sentences long enough to be centuries weighted there. The Hecaton Kyries, freed to throw at last, would be asked to guard at last. Stone to ward off the return of stone. Some of the old powers would be punished not with death but with placement. Atlas given the task of holding the sky that had once refused to be separate, a living hinge where the world remembers how it was made. The war was not over in a line, it was over in a settling. Dust. Quiet. The first day when the gods slept without dreaming of edges. Olympus did not declare itself victorious. It simply began doing the work victory requires. Division of realms without resentment. Honors assigned without flattery. Rights established to keep memory from turning into boasting. Zeus looked not only upward, where his thunder now owned weather, but downward to the stone that once had passed for a sun. He set it at Delphi, and the hands of mortals would touch it for ages to find the center of their world. He remembered Styx and kept his promise. He remembered Metis and kept her near, knowing that kings who forget their clever friends become simple and then fall. He remembered that he was not born by right, but by rescue. And rescue, if it is to last, must renew itself daily as law. Somewhere far below the horizon of Olympus, the sea felt the trident like a thought it had always had, and named itself to itself. The underworld felt the helm settle into custom and learned to receive without cruelty. The sisters arranged the hearth and the seasons. The air learned to be a place where stories could be told without groaning. What remained was not merely to hold power, but to keep the peace that power had made possible. And peace of this sort has enemies built into the nature of things. Old grudges, new monsters, and the very fact that desire, Eros, who was there before all of this, keeps drawing things together in ways that make trouble and beauty at the same time. The storm had been gathered and thrown. Olympus had risen out of a war that was, in the end, a surgery. The patient, the world, breathed differently now. There would be more fevers, more remedies, more warnings and songs, but for the first time, the middle space between earth and sky felt not like a trap or a battlefield, but like a room. When the noise of the Titanomachy had at last fallen silent, the world seemed to pause. Dust settled on the ridges of Othrys and Olympus. The rivers, once muddied by the trampling of armies, cleared. Gaia, who had endured oppression, revolt and war, stretched her body as though releasing a breath she had been holding since chaos first yawned. A new order had risen, but it was not yet fully shaped. Victory had to be made real through division. The brothers, Zeus, Poseidon and Hades, stood together in council. Each carried the emblem the Cyclopes had given, Zeus with his thunderbolt, Poseidon with his trident, Hades with his helm of invisibility. The question before them was not whether they had won, but how they would now govern the world they had fought to free. For what is victory if it is not distributed? What is rule if it is not arranged? The poets tell us that the brothers cast lots to decide their domains, by chance or by destiny, for the two are often indistinguishable in myth. Zeus drew the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld. The earth itself, Gaia's body, was not given to any one god. It remained shared ground, neutral and sacred, the place where mortals would live, love, suffer, and build their cities. Zeus, now king of the gods, raised his throne upon Mount Olympus, the high peak that reached into the clouds. From there he watched storms gather, and with his thunderbolt he enforced justice, or at times, simply his will. His reign was both protection and dominance, for to hold the sky was to hold the weather, and to hold the weather was to hold life. Poseidon took the deep, restless realm of the sea. His trident stirred waves into storm, or calmed them into silence. Sailors prayed to him for safe passage, and fishermen for full nets. But Poseidon was never a gentle ruler. His moods shifted like the ocean itself, calm one moment, violent the next. Earthquakes too were said to be his doing, for the ground trembled when he struck it with his trident. Hades descended into the unseen. With his helm, he moved without sight, ruler not of terror but of inevitability. His kingdom was not chaos, but order of another kind, the realm of the dead, where each soul found its place. Unlike his brothers, Hades was not worshipped with joy, but with solemnity. His domain was feared, but it was also necessary. The Greeks did not imagine death as an end, but as a passage into Hades' halls. This division of the cosmos reflected the Greek sense of balance. Sky, sea, and underworld, three pillars of existence, each with its master. No single god could claim the whole. Even Zeus, king though he was, did not rule alone. His brothers stood as equals in domain, if not in title, and together they maintained the fragile order that had emerged from war. But division also meant distance. The brothers, though bound by blood and victory, rarely worked in harmony. Poseidon's pride often clashed with Zeus's authority. Hades, dwelling far below, remained apart, his power quiet but absolute. Their unity was never simple, it was always strained, a reminder that even the gods lived within the prophecy of conflict. Around them gathered the rest of the Olympian family. Hera, sister and consort of Zeus, became queen of the gods, protector of marriage, yet also a figure of jealousy and vengeance. Demeter watched over the harvest, her grief and joy shaping the seasons. Hestia tended the hearth, quiet but essential, the center of every home and temple. These sisters, once swallowed by their father, now stood free, their domains woven into the daily life of mortals. The new order was not built only by family. Others joined Olympus. Athena, born fully armed from Zeus's head, goddess of wisdom and war. Apollo, radiant with music and prophecy, and his twin Artemis, the huntress. Hephaestus, smith of fire, and Ares, god of bloodlust. Aphrodite, risen from sea foam, whose beauty swayed gods and mortals alike. Hermes, the swift messenger, trickster and guide. Dionysus, the late-born, who carried ecstasy and frenzy wherever he walked. Each found a place upon Olympus, each a thread in the fabric of divine order. From chaos to Gaia, from Ouranos to Kronos, from Kronos to Zeus, the cosmos had unfolded through struggle and succession. Every new generation rose by cutting away the old, and every throne stood already shadowed by prophecy. The reign of the Olympians was no different. It was strong, radiant, glorious, but never secure. Beneath the mountains, the Titans still groaned in Tartarus, guarded by the 100-handed ones. The prophecy of rebellion had not ended, it had only been delayed. The Greeks, hearing these stories, understood that order is never final. It is always provisional, always trembling, always one act away from collapse. And perhaps that is why they told these myths, not to promise stability, but to remind themselves that instability is the law of the cosmos. Even the gods live under it. Even kings are subject to it. Even the sky itself was once cut from the earth by a single stroke. The world was divided. Olympus stood, but the cycle had not been broken. It had only begun anew. And so, dear listener, we have reached the end of the first great cycle. From the yawning gap of chaos came Gaia, the earth, and Ouranos, the sky. From their union sprang titans, cyclopes, and beings too strange for measure. From oppression came revolt. From revolt came blood. From blood came vengeance and beauty alike. Kronos rose by cutting down his father, and yet he too was consumed by fear, swallowing his children one by one. But hidden in a cave, Zeus grew, and with the help of his allies, he rose to cast down the Titans. The war thundered for 10 long years, shaking mountains, cracking valleys, until at last the young gods triumphed. The Titans were thrown into Tartarus, guarded by the 100-handed ones. The cosmos was divided, Zeus in the sky, Poseidon in the sea, Hades in the underworld. The sisters, once swallowed, now ruled hearth and harvest, seasons and order. And Olympus stood as the dwelling of a new age. This is where the Greeks believed the true order of things began. A world not perfect, not eternal, but balanced, always trembling, always alive. Even the gods could not escape prophecy. Even they were bound by fear, by hope, by the cycles of time. As you let these stories settle in your mind, remember what they are. Not just tales of gods and battles, but mirrors of our own lives. We, too, are born out of chaos. We too struggle with the weight of what came before us. We too inherit both beauty and burden. Close your eyes now. Let the image of Olympus rest in your thoughts. The sky clear after war, the sea stretching calm, the underworld quiet and still. Let the thunder fade into silence, the sickle lie buried, the world breathing in peace, if only for a while. Sleep well. Dream deep, and carry with you the truth the Greeks always knew, that out of chaos comes life, out of struggle comes change, and in every ending lies the beginning of another story. Good night.